Pitts. I'm the editor-in-chief of Escapist Magazine, Volume 2. We're going to talk a little bit about the road to Volume 2, what happened to Volume 1, why we brought it back. Like these guys will show some new videos and all in the process. We did this panel at PAX in Seattle, and at PAX, I felt like this, I don't know if y'all familiar with the Escapists, but it got weird there. So I felt we needed to set some ground rules for our appearance in Seattle. We're gonna talk about it. We're gonna talk about the weirdness. Yeah, and that usually attracts people who just want to get your face in it, that sort of thing. So I don't think y'all need this, but just in case, y'all are polite. Y'all look like fine people. Yeah. Just in case, I have to say it. Rule number 1. Behave. No disruptions. There'll be no arguing or spitting in these guys' faces. No death threats, please. Are we clear?
Yes.
Can I spit on that?
Yes.
These guys are just in general, no spitting?
In general, maybe until we're done. Okay. Okay. All right. So,
I had some UI basic WeWhip, so I mean, what am I going to do?
yeah, exactly. Just roll. Okay. So, are we clear? You're supposed to say
Yes.
Crystal. Okay, we're clear.
Crystal.
Yes, we are. Okay. Rule number 2. We're gonna have questions later. A question ends with a question mark. The question is 1, maybe 2 sentences at most. The question does not have multiple parts. The question is not your turn to expound upon the topics we have discussed. The question is for these gentlemen or these people to hear the answer to. Please respect that rule. Are we clear?
Crystal.
Sure we're clear.
Crystal.
Crystal clear.
Okay, welcome to the show, folks. Bob Chipman is a prolific author, film critic, entertainment journalist, video producer, independent filmmaker, writer, creative producer of web series like Escape to the Movies, The Big Picture, and Game Overthinker. Say hi, Bob. Woo!
Bonjour Toronto, bonjour le Canada.
Greetings. Welcome.
Show off.
1/4 of me is from here.
Which, never mind.
Maternal grandmother.
Yahtzee Croshaw is an author, critic, game developer, former bar owner, media personality. He is the creator and longtime producer of Zero Punctuation at the Escapist.
We don't talk about the bar much anymore.
Yeah, I'm sorry, man. I just keep bringing it up. 'Cause I think it was awesome. I mean, I wish I never got to go.
Well, if only more people with money to spend had thought the same way as you.
Well, it's all about location.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a little far for me.
Yeah,
What
there was
might-
like 15 nicer looking pubs on the way to it. I think it's probably.
Yahtzee's also one of a relatively short list of people who have held the same job at the Escapist longer than I did. So, I forgot the music. Y'all were supposed to have intro music. Darn. Hang on, we can go back. Well, Nick's here, so we can go back. Hey, it's Nick.
Hello.
How's it going? It's going
We started early. It's not your fault.
Did you start early?
Oh, it is 2 minutes early.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. Victor!
Nice to meet you.
Victor Lucas is a television personality and the host of the long-running show, Electronic Playground. Woo! Okay. There we go. We can use the music first. That's like your intro. Moving on. So we're going to go all the way back to the beginning of the Escapist and work our way forward. We'll try to do it very quickly to leave room for new videos and questions. But I feel it's important to take a look back. Hey, this was what the Escapist looked like when it was founded. This is like issue whatever. It's like issue in the single digits, I think. We did weekly issues like a magazine. This is what, when you went to escapistmagazine.com, those of you who weren't there, this is what would show up on the webpage, right? This is 2005. These would be like multiple squares of images, and you could click on any of these titles, and it would take you to that article, right? And then you could navigate page by page like a magazine. kind of like an iPad thing before the iPad came out. Really, very few people had done that sort of thing. No one had done that with games. And that lasted for a while. Like, that was the website. That was the Escapist for a while. People would print it out as a PDF, put it on their coffee table.
Were you there then?
I was.
Yeah.
I started in May of that year. I think more people actually printed it out and put it on their coffee table than actually read it.
That's cool.
Yeah. Starting in 2006, we decided we did an actual website with articles and forums, and the issues still happened, and they showed up in that little box there. But we had all kinds of other stuff, all kinds of writers and things. No Yahtzee. Therefore, the traffic was kind of low. 2007, Little Evolution, Escape Radio, was a podcast I produced. You know, more of saying, "Oh crap!" and then Yahtzee showed up. What? We're gonna play your the very first zero punctuation.
Oh, must we?
I believe we must. Actually, no, this wasn't zero punctuation. This was a fully rambling-matic, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
this is when I was put on YouTube on my own channel. The first one actually for the Escapist was something with swords.
Swords. Yeah. This was the
I
video.
wonder, when you first saw me, I guess, and you realised you needed me around.
This is how I discovered you. Let's watch. And before we learned about things such as copyrights.
The Darkness is a horror-themed first-person shooter based on some comic book I've never heard of. The game is by the delightfully named Starbreeze Studios, whose most notable previous title would be The Chronicles of Riddick Escape from Butcher Bay, in which players piloted a claymation Vin Diesel in his ongoing quest to masturbate himself raw in the faces of audiences worldwide. Anyway, the Darkness demo starts with the hero Jackie in the back of a car being driven by some of his Italian mobster friends who have apparently abandoned the mafia's pretense of respectability in order to drive recklessly through the streets at full speed like a pair of gibbering twats. In no time at all, the police find something objectionable about this behaviour and pursue them, prompting a pitched high-speed exchange of gunfire. Jackie, who looks for all the world like a cross between Kevin Spacey, Benicio del Toro and Morticia Adams, is handed a shotgun to join in the fun, but the device seems to confuse him and he sits loading shells into it so slowly and carefully you'd think he was assembling a ship in a bottle. Meanwhile, the car is swerving wildly back and forth and bullets are whizzing through the air, and by the time Jackie figures out which end of the gun is which, an almighty crash hurls him from the vehicle and into the actual game. He awakens in a cemetery where we are told through some shitty exposition that his mafia boss uncle has betrayed him and sent some hitmen to make him dead, presumably because he's sick of having to babysit the gormless fuckwit, something I could fully sympathise with through the subsequent gunfight. The clunky PS3 controls combined with Jackie's utter lack of survival instinct meant my top speed was somewhere in the region of slow walking pace while hitmen ran around popping caps in my dopey arse. Fortunately, at more or less this point, the titular Darkness enters the fray and a bunch of giant licorice Twizzlers sprout from Jackie's spine. Our hero is ostensibly possessed by some ancient all-powerful demonic force, which looks very scary, but did absolutely bugger all to assist as I ran around the cemetery for half an hour trying to find the way out. My only usable darkness power at that point was something that allowed me to extrude one of the licorice Twizzlers to explore tight spaces, and I spent most of the time fruitlessly trying to find a way to make it penetrate a flimsy iron gate, before discovering that what I was supposed to do was go back to an easily missed white spot on the ground, use it to summon an evil imp, and instruct it to move a thoughtlessly parked car out of the way of one of the cemetery entrances. Let me just reiterate that. The game literally has me summon a multi-fanged, beclawed monstrosity from the depths of hell, not so I can make it enslave the innocent or lay waste to all worldly nations, but so that I can enlist it as my own personal breakdown service. I couldn't play the game for much longer because a short time later I found myself stuck outside another locked gate with no idea of how to proceed. The game's only hint to what to do was that I had just unlocked a new darkness power that allowed me to pick up heavy objects. I tried throwing a car at the sealed gate, but lacking a throw button, all I could do was rub it against the metalwork. Then I had the brainwave of setting up a pile of crap to form a staircase to get up onto a nearby roof. But the moment I got up there, I ran headlong into an invisible wall because apparently I wasn't supposed to be doing that. I took my frustrations out on a nearby hobo before saying, fuck this shit, and doing something else. The Darkness has been getting some pretty good reviews all over the place that use phrases like brilliant storytelling and top-notch presentation, which give me cause to hesitate before I use phrases like monstrous pile of shit. Most of my problem is with the horrible controls, and the mouse and keyboard interface would swiftly fix that. And maybe after the rocky beginning, the game is nothing short of fan-dabby-fabulous, but the demo's job was to make me want to buy the full version, and in that regard it's a big dark gothy failure. Personally, at this point I'd only consider buying the full version of The Darkness if it came down to budget price. And they threw in another, better game. That's the cake. And Belgium. That's
Yeah, it sounds exactly the same.
That was where I had some top speed.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, 10 years, that was 10 years ago. More than 10 years ago.
Was it those prices that made you so angry?
Yeah, 110
That's
Australian dollars.
unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah.
understand it at the time.
That was actually kind of a big deal because it was, when we first started this, it was like, can we get a game to Yahtzee? And they would send it to him and it would be a US version. And he was like, that doesn't help.
Oh, wow.
I used to import US versions of games if they was coming out in the US earlier than it was Australia, and even including packaging was usually cheaper than buying at retail.
So a quick word about content rating. We attempt to make this a family show. There was some version of this presentation with beeps. This is clearly not that. But this does touch on the conversation Yahtzee and I saw this video in the afternoon, Eastern, 10 years ago. My boss said, hire that person. And I said, yes, sir. And I reached out to Yahtzee, who had just woken up in Australia. And within like 4 or 6 hours, we had a deal to make these for apparently ever. And the one thing Yahtzee asked me, he says, well, I have to tone down my language. And I said, no.
That was it. That was the whole email, one word.
That is a Russ Pitts email, isn't it?
I mean, what else was there to say? Like, no. Well, anyway, off started an explosion of traffic and excellence and Webby Awards and radical changes. This was our very first video thing. We talked about video for a while, and the full emblematic video of the darkness was the first thing we had seen. That was, yeah, that's a pretty good video. That's what we need to build our video empire on, and so we did. In 2008, we launched, among other things, we launched a film festival. We asked people to submit videos, and first prize was going to be an employment contract. Winners of that employment contract were Canada's own Loading Ready Run with their unskippable videos. Not able to join us for this show, but they may join us at some point in the future.
That's the home team pop, really?
They're West Coast. And then they're not here.
Loading Ready one's West Coast?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Out of Vancouver?
Out of Victoria.
Out of Victoria.
Well, I think they're down in Australia now, right?
Oh yeah, they're in Australia now.
They're in
Yeah.
Texas.
Yeah, they're too good for us.
Oh, cool.
2009, I took over as editor-in-chief. I had been previously other things. I had like 5 different business cards from my time at this business. Last one was editor-in-chief, which I started as 2009. And after 10 years of professional and career development, I'm, again, editor-in-chief of this business. The end of it. Also notable 2009, Moviebob! Its new series, Escape to the Movies with Moviebob. I actually don't remember what episode this is. Do you, Bob?
If it's the first one, it's either the review of Up, which is really good, and if it's like the first one that ever got published on the site, it might be Transformers 2, which is a cringing embarrassment that I will apologize to you all for in advance.
All right.
For the movie? Thank you for
Well,
apologizing.
well, the movie's bad, but my review is actually worse.
Oh.
All right, 50-50. I can feel the tension.
Boy, what a summer it hasn't been so far. 2 film series once venerated for brains and vision got dumbed down into generic action flicks and wound up as box office disappointments, while another series once venerated for brains and vision got dumbed down into a generic action flick and wound up as a smash hit. I'm not sure which is more depressing. Meanwhile, in less than a month, we get to see Michael Bay bend the Transformers over a rail. Again. Is there anything to lift my spirit? Ooh, a Pixar movie. Thank heaven. What a long, strange trip it's been for the Wunderkinds at Pixar. No, morphing from its place as the lone, cutting-edge arm of the once great Disney animation empire to being in charge of the hopefully once more great Disney animation empire. They got there the good old-fashioned way, by being different from everyone else and by being good at it, creating films that connect with audiences on levels the ghettoized genre of the family film hasn't since Walt Disney himself was alive and kicking. There's a lot of theories out there about what makes Pixar so different, but for my money, the most overlooked, though not necessarily most important observation, is that they approach family storytelling from an angle we don't see a lot of anymore. Boys. The traditional Disney model of animated films may have played to everyone, but for the last few decades they've had the big bullseye fixed squarely on the eminently marketable princess set, and thus so did most of the folks trying to copy the formula. Pixar, on the other hand, has thus far trended toward lead characters and some would say sensibilities that run more toward the Y side of Chromosome Street. Beneath all the rainbow-colored CGI swirl, these are man movies about manly men doing masculine things. Sorta, kinda. Point is, it was different. I mean, it's not just that all 10 Pixar movies so far all have male leads, and older male leads at that, by the way. Only Lightning Flick and WALL-E seem to be specifically young, and even WALL-E is at least old enough to spend 2/3 of his own movie trying to get laid. They can be characterized with that most primal of mannish heartaches, the father-son dynamic. Buzz and Woody are literal icons of classic pop culture machismo, competing for dominance as the surrogate father figure to a young boy. Mike and Sully are working-class schlubs whose comfortable bachelorhood gets upended when they're forced to care for a lost kid. Finding Nemo? Come on, overprotective dad, impulsive son. It's Taken, but with fish. Mr. Incredible is an aging father trying to teach his kids the value of hard work and exceptionalism in a world that punishes the unique and the gifted. Rennie the Rat frets that his love of fine foods will prevent him from living up to the standards of his tough, old-school father figure. And now here we have Up, which carries this emerging theme to an even further extreme, telling the story of Carl Fredricksen, a bitterly aging man fighting a losing battle with the slow encroachment of modernity, who finds new purpose as he undertakes a late-in-life adventure and forges a reluctant friendship with an irritating but endearing young boy. It's James and the Giant Peach meets Gran Torino. Of the many delights offered by Up, featured prominently is the fact that the trailers have given almost none of the story away, so I'll endeavor to do much the same, as going into a film like this cold dovetails perfectly with its overall theme of unknown adventures just over the horizon. Suffice it to say that Carl is a widower, locked in the gloom of perpetual mourning following the death of his beloved wife. The film relates their literally lifelong romance to us via a nearly wordless first act that ranks as some of the most powerful visual storytelling I've ever seen on film. Animated or not, it's devastating stuff. We're talking closing moments of Stand By Me here, guys. This backstory and the myriad callbacks to it later help Up pack a bittersweet wallop that makes it the hardest emotional punch to the gut Pixar has provided since Toy Story 2, and don't pretend you don't know which part I'm talking about. Anyway, realizing that the modern world is literally about to swallow him up, Carl hatches a crazy plan using thousands of balloons to turn his house into an airship and haul himself and his accumulated memories on a quest to retrace the steps of an infamous, possibly mad adventurer he'd idolized as a child. Unfortunately, he also picks up an unexpected stowaway, Russell, a clumsy, well-meaning neighborhood kid. Together, they're plunged into an odyssey that allows Up to display its true colors as a full-bore action-adventure movie that flat-out beats the stuffing out of all this summer's other entries into that genre by pulling off what none of them consistently managed: interesting, likable characters in thrilling situations. As is par for the course with Pixar, the visual and thematic elements of the film, while highly original, also seem to draw for some pretty impressive pedigree. Carl and Russell's exploits are rich with the influences of classic adventure fiction like Jules Verne, Edgar Rice Burroughs, Arthur Conan Doyle, and Rudyard Kipling, but I also detect hints of inspiration from German auteur Werner Herzog, who just recently made a documentary about aerial exploration and who specializes in tales of half-mad, half-brilliant men striking bold stands against the forest primeval. His Fitzcarraldo hauling a steamship over a mountain range isn't all that far removed from Carl Fredricksen and his improbable balloon scheme. Even the film's more grim turns, featuring a villain who serves as a dark parallel to Carl's adventurous spirit, carry with them the sense of seldom-seen depth. When Up detours into the heart of darkness, it does so literally, into Joseph Conrad's heart of darkness, which you may be more familiar with as Apocalypse Now. Up is the quintessential summer movie-going experience, a sprawling, adventurous film with thrilling action, hilarious comedy, real scares, affecting emotional depth. It has the guts to occasionally be profoundly sad, but the skill to parlay that sadness into jump-up-and-cheer moments of reclaimed joy, the sort of experience you used to get from the likes of Indiana Jones, or maybe Frodo Baggins. I don't mean to keep beating that horse, but it bears repeating. Carl Fredricksen, cartoon caricature of a 78-year-old balloon salesman, is here a more effective and involving action hero than Wolverine, Captain Kirk, and John Connor all rolled into one. Folks, I could keep praising this for another hour or more, but I hope you get the idea by now. Look, I know it's a cartoon. I know you might want to dismiss it as a kiddie movie. Don't. This is one of the best films you will see this year. Don't miss it. Oh, one more thing. Parents, just a quick heads up. Your kid's new favorite character is named Doug, and he is awesome. See you next time.
How could we not hire that guy? I remember seeing Bob.
They haven't changed a bit, have they?
All that innocence of you. I remember seeing Bob's stuff and thinking this is not only the best film criticism on the internet at that time. It's the best film criticism I think I've seen about our kinds of stuff. Just an amazingly talented smart guy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And thankfully got a better mic eventually.
Yeah, I've got a better mic, learned to write, to be spoken and not just reading the written review directly into the microphone, which is still have to do on occasion. But it mostly holds up, I think, right?
Yeah.
And are we beyond the spoiler threshold now, 10 years later, on that film?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Yeah. We don't have to talk about it. Thus beginneth peak Escapist, I think, arguably. 2010, we had folks like Load and Ready Run, we had comics, Yahtzee wrote a column, let's see, Critical Miss, they're back with us again. Lots of really great stuff was happening in 2010. I think probably one of the most fun times for me is that post-webby, lots of video series, lots of good things happening. And then the dark times. So forgive these images, the actual technology that we just recently reacquired is very, very broken, and most of these earlier versions of the website no longer exist. So a lot of this is pulled from Internet Archive. What's interesting, though, if you look back, right, 2010, 2009, 2008, 2007, 2006, 2005, lots of innovation, right? We were always innovating, we were always changing, we were always doing something new with The Escapist because you all demanded it and technology was changing and we wanted to keep up with that and keep the whole thing fresh. So here's 2014. You remember, anybody else remember what else interesting happened in 2014? Any kind of gaming related thing? No? Kind of controversial? No, probably not.
I can't recall.
Yeah, I can't recall what that might have been. What's interesting though is here's what the Escapist website looked like in 2014, and here's what it looked like in 2018. 14, 18, 14, 18, 14, 18, 14. So in addition to a lot of content changes and editorial changes and philosophical changes, I don't want to say we because I wasn't there. They stopped caring. The technology stopped being updated. Things got progressively bad. People started leaving. I was out in 2011. I left The Escapist, helped found Polygon. And people progressively. I don't want to dwell on that. People left. But here's the thing, right? I believe it was just funny when we first did this panel. We hadn't yet relaunched the thing, right? Well, we relaunched it now. Folks like Bob, folks like Yahtzee, folks like Gray and Corey, comic, believed that we could do this thing. The thing about how weird Escapist got during that time, it wasn't like an act of God that made it weird. It wasn't like magic, little elves running around painting everything black and dull and dreary. It was, people made decisions that led in bad directions. Some of them were mistakes, some of them were intentional, but it was just people who did that. So we're also people, and we can undo that. And we can bring it back, and we can make it cool and interesting and exciting. In fact, we already have. This is The Escapist Magazine Volume 2. It just launched a couple of months ago. We've got articles and videos and zero punctuation and Bob stuff and stuff new coming out. And it's really exciting. We're trying to go back to, the original energy that founded the thing in 2005. Really looking hard at culture, doing long-form articles that can last a long time, doing videos that are meaningful, that we can create a community around. Positivity, fun, and light for adults, not for 12-year-olds, people like you and me who do stuff. If there's 12-year-olds in here right now, I'm sorry.
The 12-year-olds will be there.
They'll be there.
They're smarter than we give them credit for.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're winding the clock back and simultaneously advancing the technology and the way we go about making a website. So we're just getting started. The team and I, I worked on relaunching this thing for almost a year. Started working with Enthusiast Gaming on bringing it back earlier this year, and they reacquired the website from its previous owners. And now I work for Enthusiast Gaming, hosts of this very show, and we're building the Escapist together and other things. It's really exciting, and like I said, we're just getting started. Team and I, Samantha Nelson and Anthony Agnello and Kyle Gatto's doing community. We have Alexis Brown, who's going to be doing some of the video editing. We're growing the team. It's a really exciting time. So I'm glad you guys could be here to help us sort of show that off. I will answer all of your questions about how we did that, why, what went wrong, at any point. Things always go wrong. But let's show some new videos real quick. Just to give you guys a taste of the kind of energy and excitement that's coming up. First, this video, which we promised we would show last night, and didn't get to.
You got to check that.
Yeah, they were like, no, time's up. I'm like, what? Anyway, so here's the latest from Bob, coming soon to an Escapist magazine review.
Battlefield fans are very upset that there was a plucky lady cyborg in the trailer for V for Victory, and in their opinion, that betrays the pretense to realism of the game's allegedly historically accurate World War II setting. This is the basis of an unbridled rage fire that's been burning unabated around the game for, hold on, let me check that. 5 months? Guys, Jesus Christ. Now, I'm 37 years old, which in online gamer internet personality years practically makes me Steve Rogers without the magic blue immortality steroids, so this is clearly going to be one of those areas where I'm just out of state with where games culture is in modernity. I came of age in the era of gaming where sort of punk rock looking lady cyborg in World War II, by the way, yes, I know she's not a cyborg because prosthetic limbs have existed for centuries of human history, but you'd be surprised how many people aren't doing a shtick when they call it that. Anyway, she would have fit right in with fire-breathing Russian circus strongman, dinosaur fighter, princess rescuing, turtle-stomping Italian plumber from Brooklyn, Greek disco demigod with flaming yo-yo, whatever the hell was going on here. You get the idea. In the 16-bit days, you demanded your money back if they didn't offer you at least one Trinity-looking action girl with a robot arm. I tell you what. Hell, when Capcom did the Alien vs. Predator arcade game, they were like, yeah, we know people are going to want to play as the Predator and maybe Schwarzenegger, but we're going to give him power armor anyway just to be sure, and throw in a lady soldier ninja just because. And then they decided they liked her enough, she became part of the Street Fighter canon, meaning Predators, Xenomorphs, and Cyborg Dutch are part of the Street Fighter canon too. How about that? But okay, lady in video game, men on internet angry, rest of world point and laugh, film at 11. Now look, for a change, I'm going to go against my first instincts here and take on face value that at least a portion of the suspension of disbelief complaints are sincere and not just cover for sad internet man-baby misogyny. Not necessarily because I'm convinced that it is, but there's a more interesting discussion to be had if I do. See, whenever the that's not realistic argument crops up in games like this, or Call of Duty, or Assassin's Creed, or Total War, really? Total War? Can't you make Rome not fall in Total War? So we're not really talking, oh, whatever. There's a tendency to dunk on the fanboys by pointing out that all of the other dumb physics, logic-defying things you can do in these games because they are, in fact, video games. And yeah, that's funny, but it also leads to people arguing past each other instead of actually engaging in any meaningful way. Yes, all representations and recreations of historic periods and events in art and fiction are to varying degrees unrealistic because they are, in fact, unreal. Even the most studiously researched and painstakingly crafted version thereof is at best an interpretation of reality, an expression, an abstraction even, always in some way informed by the portion of reality it opts to focus on, the data available at the time, the cultural perspective of the storyteller and the visualizer, and the generally culturally accepted shared vision of what history in question is supposed to mean and represent. Even the word realism, when used relative to art, is typically not meant to describe accuracy, but illusion thereof, like the use of color and shading to make two-dimensional paintings appear three-dimensional. Saving Private Ryan created what was called the most realistic feeling World War II movie atmosphere ever at that point by using desaturated cinematography to create the optical psychological illusion of a happy medium between our conscious understanding that the real world was in color and the subconscious cultural memory of most audiences vis-a-vis what that war looked like being black and white photographs. For one famous example of the same applied not only to visuals but to general aesthetic, which of course was then ported into video games through the Medal of Honor series produced by Steven Spielberg. To cut to the chase, yes, when an angry man on the internet says I'm mad at Battlefield because the cyborg lady breaks my immersion by being unrealistic, and someone else goes, well, actually, she's not unrealistic because there's no reason such a person couldn't have fought at the war at the time, and several instances are known, etc., etc. Okay, great, but you're spinning your wheels. Because that's not really what the angry dude has got a bug up his ass about. He's not really saying he's doubling down on accuracy. What he's saying is, I was hoping to play a game grounded in the aesthetics of what the reality of World War II had been presented as in history books and films for much of the late 20th century. This features intrusions by more recent revisions of what that reality probably looked like, and that's not what I came for. And there's not, and I'm going to parse this very carefully, very carefully, innately anything wrong with that, necessarily. I mean, there's almost always a lot wrong with it right after, because it almost never stays there and instead morphs into much uglier clarifications like, what I mean is, I don't want to see black soldiers or woman soldiers, and I don't care what history has to say about that, because modern cultural Marxist academics are probably just making that shit up anyway. Sure, yes, granted, but conceptually, in and of itself, preferring the retrograde conception of something is not necessarily damning. Just, you know, most of the time it ends up there because one thing tends to follow another. Now, to use a personal example, I'm one of those guys who as a kid was really big into dinosaurs, and I'll watch any movie or play any game with dinosaurs in it at least once, but when I do, I prefer they design them to look like the projections of what dinosaurs looked like when I was a kid, as opposed to what I think they do now, which leans more toward the big fluffy bird direction and not so the giant cool lizard monster direction. And I know that's silly and unscientific, I just like them better the way they used to draw them. That doesn't mean I'm quasi-creationist about it or deny the current science, it's just, given the choice in fictional dinosaur entertainment, that's where I tend to land. What I'm saying is, sometimes as a preference is just a preference for an aesthetic, for a subject matter, whatever. Sure, sometimes it can be tied to an issue or an identity or some broader context, positive or negative, but not always. And when it's not, you don't need to have to go reaching for it. I get why some people feel that they need to. They see this or that cause getting listened to when they complain about a dislike in a game, and they think, oh, if I frame my hang-up about Battlefield as some kind of big deal issue, I can get attention too, but not every hang-up is a big issue, or at the very least, they aren't all created equal. I don't like the graphics in Mega Man 11. It's generic. It looks like 100 other fucking modern 2D side-scrollers. I wish they'd either stuck with the 8-bit NES recreation or went with something radically different, but I'm not going to call myself like a pixel art preservationist or a Capcom fundamentalist or something to make that point. Why would I need to? I'm not into this style as the beginning and end of it. It doesn't have a deeper context, and I honestly don't think most of the knee-jerk projections of this kind of character mod being an optional part of a World War II game actually have a deeper context either, at least not authentically at first blush. Battlefield going back to World War II had me hoping for something in the tone and texture of Where Eagles Dare or Rat Patrol and... This kind of character design feels kind of now, sensibility-wise, and it takes me out of the headspace I want to be in, is a simple, understandable, and even, again, presented in isolation, reasonable take, sort of. Why would you need to blow it out into the puffed-up absurdity of, this is an affront to history perpetrated by rainbow-washing SJWs? Why does they went a certain direction with the art designs, I'd have preferred a different direction, have to jump the guardrail into, it's a postmodernist soy conspiracy by the globalist cabal to degrade the historic accomplishments of Western achievement? I mean, I don't get it. Well, okay, that's not true. I do get it. I just don't get who you think you're fooling. Now, there's several whole other angles to this, but that's for another time and another show. I don't want to bore everybody. For now, let me leave you with this. As appealing as righteous fury in the sense of individual likes or dislikes being part of a bigger picture can be, do you not see how absurd you look? How badly the core of your own arguments are hurt by these kinds of tangential tangents? Does it not register that you're only making it less likely anyone is going to want to make the game that looks or feels the way you prefer if this is the attitude they think it supports? And even if you are given to suspect that game development decision-making in 2018 is endlessly besieged by the boogie woman of the shrill, shrieking SJW Harrod and Harpy, what good does it do for your behavior to mirror that? Look, even Freud had to concede that sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, and in much the same way that many gamers, myself included, have cautioned culture watchers to acknowledge the distinction that not every sexy drawing is a deliberate affront to female autonomy, not every protagonist with a gun is stumping for the NRA, and Mario was never trying to sell you raccoon pelts regardless of what you may have heard from PETA, remember that shit show? Gamers who are so unnerved by this scenario should likewise acknowledge that not every anachronistic, according to you, design decision in a Battlefield game is a bucket of rainbow paint being thrown on the historic monument of your choosing. Just a thought. And also, is rainbow paint really the worst thing that could be thrown at something? Thank you.
As soon as we finish the art.
I probably showed a little too much of Rat Patrol, but for some reason I couldn't not.
I just wanted to see what the next sort of ultra manly man was going to be out. And it's like, how many ultra manly men are in this show?
And forgotten actor.
Several.
Bob, Game Over Thinker predates everything Bob did for me at The Escapist. And we've been talking about bringing it to Escapist since I've known Bob. And I'm probably more excited than he is.
No, I'm psyched. I'm like, now that once I figured out that I could do a version of it that I could actually knock out in about a weekend's time, I was like, yes, all right, good, I can finally get this over here. Because for those of you who've seen it before, the original version of Game Over Thinker used to have live action skits, and it would shoot outside, and there would be ninjas and multiple actors, and it would take weeks to do an episode. It was very elaborate. Why am I not holding a microphone while I'm saying but, so this is a sort of stripped down version thereof, but it gets there, and there will be at some point mention of what happened to the other stuff. Those of you who are longtime fans may have caught reference in the background noise to other parts of it, but I'm very excited about it, and I'm glad it seems to have been well received. So thank you. I was a little nervous about that.
I believe this next video is from Yahtzee.
It's amazing.
A thing that
It's the official announcement of the thing.
The official announcement of the thing. Is there anything you'd like to say, or should we roll the video?
Yeah, I think we should just let it speak for itself.
An official announcement of a thing from Yahtzee. I don't know.
Woohoo!
I'm cool with that good.
I'm looking on that because it's something I want to make. Back when Steve was still with Defy, I was working with like a company that was there hard to buy, and now things sort of just split up and all apart, the rights all over the place. No, so it's basically done. I'm just trying to get it all untangled so we can get it out there.
Where'd you make it? Did you make it? Or
Yeah, it's all me basically.
Yeah.
Got some like assets of music from some other sources, but but yeah, I'm hoping to put that up to Steam. Well, we got the Steam page and stuff. That's less the Escapist itself.
Yeah. Maybe this year.
Maybe.
Coming in Q something. Well, that's really exciting, and I've been looking forward to that, and I know you've been working hard on it for a while. So keep your eye out for that. Probably Steam, maybe this year. We'll be more specific. But we know specific. But like, this, literally just had a conversation that made this thing seem entirely possible less than 12 hours ago. So fresh off the presses. Next video, and I believe it's our last new video, something my friend Victor and I have been working on.
After watching these videos, I realized I have to start speaking way quicker.
And actually, Victor actually hasn't seen this video yet.
No, I have not.
No one has, actually. I finished cutting it 3 hours ago. So hopefully it works.
This is where we're at. Everywhere you look, people yelling about games, people angry about games, people streaming games. Look at how much money games make. Look at how the studios are struggling. All the love, all the hype, all the expectation, all the controversy, all that superficial nonsense. Stop. Think for a second. Games are art. All respect to the late and great Mr. Ebert. But games are art. They come from somewhere deep inside of a collective imagination. And when they began, they were magic. And now games are alive. And we know that they are not magic. They are a fusion of science and risk. Games can be transportive. They can be inspiring. And they are almost always frustrating. It's almost as if games are human. Because they are. Games are made by humans. Large groups of them. Small groups. Sometimes only one. And you know what? We're forgetting how to talk about that. Games are not just a collection of features. They're an expression made through collaboration between the team that makes the game and ultimately you, the player. For 25 years, I've understood and have created content that reflects the principle that people are more interesting than the products that they make. And now, working with Escapist magazine, I'm proud to be part of a new show that travels to game studios all over the world to explore the very human act of creating the art that we call video games. Welcome to Recon.
Woo!
Vic and I and my Flying Saucer crew have been here in Toronto filming that all week. Me and my crew have wanted to do a kind of show where we go places and meet people and just get into the culture and the places and things that make the people who they are, who make these things. I don't like being on camera, so he's like, well, we're not going to do that. Meanwhile, Vic is this amazingly talented writer, performer, host, and he says, hey,
He's handsome.
Oh, those cheeks. He says, hey, let's do something together, and I'm like, I got just the idea. Victor says, I got just the idea. It's like chocolate and peanut butter.
Yeah, I've been, it's crazy because I met Russ really for the first time. I mean, we've been friends and sort of, ran into each other at different events over many decades at different places. But last year at E3, I heard that this was all coming together, and we had a sit down, and Menashe, who runs Enthusiast, said, you guys should talk and do something, and maybe there's a show there. And we both agreed that there was a show there at that moment, but we had a great conversation, a phone call, and we just started spieling on what we could do together. And we just came on this concept, which is a travelogue show, which is a show which is really about visiting different cities and visiting different studios, and not just talking about, what they're making, what they're working on, because that's really fascinating, but it's also what everybody talks about. And I know from, making Electric Playground for so long that what keeps our show still fun to watch 25 years later is that we went to these studios and we met with these people, and that's really fascinating. And even like with EP, we did focus on those features and we did focus on those games, and that was our way into those spaces, but it was the humans that have, and those human interactions that have been so captivating and so fun to rewatch. And I thought there's something there. There's something about exploring these cities and exploring these studios and these different facets, these different ways that everybody approaches it. There's lots to be, up in arms about in games. There always is. There's lots to criticize. There's lots to critique. But I think no one in any creative industry gets out of bed and says, I want to go piss people off today. I want to go make something miserable. And I want to be miserable all day. If I could just have that, that would be great. So what Recon's really going to do is kind of examine what gets these people out of bed and why they're inspired and why they, and hopefully we can dive into some touchy subject matter. And I think we did a little bit this in the past week. But more than anything, I think I just want to, like I always have in my career, just kind of honor the, I think of these people as Don Quixotes chasing windmills, they're crazy. And we are all too, by the way. Building anything is incredibly difficult and challenging, and it doesn't, you don't have to put it on a pedestal, but it's fun to examine, and it's fun to explore it, because it's a human condition to dream and to chase dreams, and we all need to do that, and that's kind of what we're going to try to do with Recon. Yeah?
Yeah. I'm pleased as punch to be working with Victor. I've been a long-time admirer. This is just I think the only show that we could work together on for the first time.
Yeah.
And I hope it's the first of many, because it's all the TSLR grill shooting that I've been doing with my crew back from Human Angle and Polygon and my stage development series, and then the sort of the unique broadcaster personality aspect that you bring from your career that is just unmatched. So I think it's something new and different and really cool. So that's going to be coming Q4-ish. We got to do some more shooting.
Yes.
Yeah, we got a couple episodes in the can from this week.
The footage looks great. That's the first time I've seen it. I've been texting Russ all.
Yeah.
How is it? How am I? Am I okay?
You can tell Victor produces his own stuff, because after every shoot he's like, did you see the footage? He's not like saying, show me the footage. Which,
that's what's great for me too, is this doesn't happen that often, because I've got my own brand with Electric Playground, and it's run sort of parallel with The Escapist, and the industry doesn't do, bless you by the way, it doesn't really do that often, where people go from one outlet and work with another outlet like this, and I think it's great. I think it's really exciting and cool, and honestly I've been feeling like there's got to be something else for me to do. Like I have these relationships with these people across the industry, and I've just travel has been a huge part of my career, and I just feel like there's more to examine in there. So it's really amazing, and I'm really glad that we're putting this together.
Yeah, me too. Coming Q1 4-ish. All right, folks, you have waited patiently, and I appreciate it, and we're about to draw to a close. It's time now for your questions. Do you remember rule number 2? A question ends with a
Question mark.
There you go, very much. Are we clear on that?
Crystal.
Okay, are we still clear on that?
Crystal.
Are you sure we're clear?
Crystal clear.
All right, time for questions. Who has a question? Yes, sir.
So my question originally was going to be for just Moviebob, but I can ask all you guys this question. I'm sure I'm not the only person in here that's trying to get into making my own content. I've got a YouTube channel and stuff like that. I've seen some other people taking notes and stuff like that. So if you guys had a bit of advice for us, maybe a piece of advice, and particularly since now you have had some hard times in the industry, maybe a couple of warnings of what to avoid.
I think the one important lesson I would give is that the most important thing is consistency.
Yeah.
Because I put out a 5-minute video every week for over 10 years, and as long as if you can do that, you can be set for life, apparently. So you can become part of people's lives that way, become part of the background of people's lives, and maybe, they don't get as enthusiastic or passionate as they were around at the start, but if you went away, they'd miss you.
Yeah, they get used to hearing your voice.
Yeah, they get used to hearing my voice, exactly.
Yeah, we know full well. There was I don't know if you guys were around for this. It was 3 days when we were flipping the switch, and then the tech was so broken, it was like, whoa, where'd that switch go? It was 3 days where the site was a little unruly. People really missed zero punctuation.
There was a guy on YouTube who ripped up all the videos and stitched them all together, taking the music off the start and the end. And it was 4 hours of me talking, and people were falling asleep to that. Weirds me out a bit.
Yeah. We could do that. We do own the rights to it. Sleep with Yahtzee.
Yeah, consistency definitely important, and don't expect to
see it all come together at once. You know, patience is a very important virtue. It's such a cliche, but it's true. And get good at a few things early on, and don't try to do too. Don't make the mistake that I made really early on and try to do like a million different things all at once, because you end up doing a million things and not necessarily being good at all of them, and you kind of get in the wilderness for a while.
At the same time, you know, don't get too attached to one idea, because I was throwing shit on the internet for years before the one thing that took off happened.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Be humble. You know, not everything you create is going to be the best thing. Be okay. Learn to be okay with killing your darlings. You know, it's going to mean so much to you to create that first thing, and it should, because actually following through and creating something and finishing it is huge. A lot of people don't moved past the I should do this stage, right? So moving past that stage to the I'm doing it stage to the I did it stage, that's really huge accomplishment. Feel good about it, and then delete it.
And also write everything, you know, like write it all down. Like you can see the written work and the stuff that these guys are doing, and how proficient they are and how disciplined they are. For the stuff that I do, it isn't necessarily like I'm writing everything down, but we start with that. And when I did the first season of Electric Playground, I wrote 13 episodes of our first season, just so I could, in my mind, see what that show was. And I did something kind of similar with Recon as well, just because it's all so nebulous. So when you're starting your ideas and your concepts, learn how to write, and then also that writing that you're going to be doing for your own benefit will be what you're going to be doing to communicate with the people that will watch your stuff, or the people that you'll have to partner with to grow your stuff. Because that's the one thing too, is that no matter how on your own you are with this material, you will also always find a way to collaborate with people. You can't progress without collaboration. You cannot move forward without working with other people. So humble is huge, preparedness is huge, you know, disciplined and ready, but also malleability as well, because you don't know how much your path is going to change.
So what you're saying is it's easy.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's way easier to create than any of the four of us have ever experienced. When we started, it cost a lot of money to even kind of dream of what we were doing, and now this is all you need.
That's very true.
You know, and I mean, you could do almost everything in production on this thing and make something pretty solid. So, like $1,000. The first cameras I bought were $40,000, and they weren't great, and they weren't the best. They were just okay. And this is the first editing soft packages I bought were $40,000. I bought a deck once, an HD cam deck, because we had our first. We were one of the first video game shows to have an HD cam, HD TV show. The deck cost $75,000, and the tapes cost $200 an hour, and we don't even think about that now. I think about that. I think about that I can carry a week's worth of footage and put it into that little key pocket in my jeans. That just blows me away. You know?
And accidentally wash it.
Yes, you can do that too. Yeah.
I've done that. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
We have multiple copies of all of it across the country, actually, just in case of asteroids. Any more questions? Oh my goodness! How do we? You started the pink shirt. I think you were first.
Hello, thank
That's
you.
an awesome shirt, by the way.
It is.
I figure there's nothing more badass than the Punisher and the color pink.
Yeah.
So you combine them together, you know, pink a shirt.
Did you make it?
This is actually a question for Moviebob specifically, though. If any of you gentlemen on stage want to chime in on this, I'd love to hear your views. Bob, I've actually been a long-time fan of yours. I remember, I think the first thing I saw of yours was Game Over Thinker, episode 25 on YouTube. You were talking about violence in video games and the effect on society. The point is, I'm watching you for a long time. And one of the things that I really respect about you is... Okay, I'll try to get to it, sorry. You're able to, any advice on how to, when you're looking at a piece of art or a game that maybe is very important to you personally, but you're trying to be very critical with it and break it down, and you realize sometimes, oh, there's things in this thing that I used to love that are maybe problematic or are really messed up in their origins. How do you, any advice on how to maintain that level of being critical without feeling like, oh, I want to protect this thing because I like it, and being able to honestly engage with and go like, oh crap, this thing that I like has some problems. How do you get a distance on something that is really close to you? I think is what I'm trying to get at. Thank you.
That's a good question. For me, I don't unfortunately have any advice on how to do that specifically in regards to like individual media. You know, there isn't a switch for that works in regards to just, you know, this works for movies, games, TV, whatever. The only thing that I can say on it is that you have to apply just a critical eye and an honest introspective eye to your entire life, and that will follow. You know, if you're able to look critically at yourself and your own, your life, your lifestyle, just the world around you, that will, I don't know that those things can be divorced. I think that if you're able to look at yourself honestly, you're able to look at the things that you like and dislike honestly. And if you're not able to do one, you're not going to be able to do the other. The people I know who can be honest with themselves are honest about their media. And the people who aren't are also not. So one follows the other. If there is one like component that could be extra to it, would be to the degree that's possible, divorce the idea that something, because it means something to you, necessarily means that it is the physical thing is a part of you, that what you have to say about it means that you're saying it about yourself. That's not necessarily true. You know, if you like this movie, that doesn't necessarily, or game or whatever, that doesn't mean that a criticism of it reflects negatively back on you. That's a question that's fair to ask. You know, this thing is ugly now that I look at it. If I liked it at one point, what does that say about me? And, you know, have I grown? That's a fair question to ask, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean that. And you also don't want to be afraid of the answer. But introspection is, and not being afraid of it, would be the one word answer on that. Yeah.
I also think if you're getting too attached to like particular works, one solution is just to keep exposing yourself to more works all the time. I mean, working as a critic, that's pretty easy. Playing like a new game every week. Maybe now and again a new thing comes out that I get excited and jazzed about, and you realise that, yeah, nostalgia is bullshit. Things are constantly moving on and new interesting things are happening. I've got a review coming out next week for Return of the Obra Dinn.
He's been talking about this game.
I've been telling everyone I get the chance to. Yeah. By the guy who made Papers, Please. It's really good. Check it out.
Out now. All right, I think we have two things. Right after this, we're going to be in room 706 for a short meet and greet. First of two meet and greets we're doing today, half hour. And then we'll be back in 706 at 4 o'clock today for more meeting and greeting. Probably about an hour, I think. We have an hour in there at 4 o'clock? Okay. Thing two, I think we have time for one more question. I need you all to decide amongst yourselves which is the most important question.
I'm sorry, guys. I think you're going to run out of questions.
It's going to be a really quick answer. Okay. Who has a yes or no question? Yes or no? You're right in front.
How long for 1-0 punctuation in every collaborative?
How long? It takes it's a week's work.
Okay. Hours?
Well, playing the video game is probably the biggest part of the work. That's why it takes up most of my afternoons. And I write the script in the mornings of Monday and Tuesday, do the images Wednesday to Friday, and like stitch it all together, like usually on Friday as well. I still use Windows Movie Maker. It's all you need for like a slideshow thing.
Thank you for joining us, folks. Where to find us on the Twitters. You may follow us out and down to 706 if you didn't get a chance to ask your question. We love you all. We couldn't do it without you. Enjoy your show.